Okay, welcome everybody to class for this week. This is our second class on ethics. And I ran out of time last week and so like on my sort of preparatory stuff on ethics. So I'm just going to continue and finish. And then, so this will be kind of like part two of the introduction. And then I'm going to have to do some recordings when I'm away from work. So the recordings will be on introducing the 10 non-virtues and the Pratimoksha vows. And if I have to keep going, but I should be back in time to do live classes, and we'll get at the Bodhisattva vows, which are the, actually wrong. I'm going to start, first of all, actually with commitments. So I'd mentioned that before. So for the recording, this next week, I'm going to start with the refuge and bodhisattva commitments. So we're always talking about all the downfalls, like all the mistakes you make, but we're going to talk first of all, but what you're expected to do, which is of course the important thing. So you know what those vows are. It's sort of the vows and commitments when you take refuge as a Buddhist, getting your hair cut or whatever, when you have your little refuge name. When you take those vows, what are they? They're pretty straightforward. And then when you take bodhisattva vows in any Mahayana center, especially during a tantric empowerment, what are those vows? Then we'll get to that and the benefits of those. Then we can start introducing what happens if you break them, or kind of what it means to break them, or how do you break them, this kind of thing. Okay, starting here with the Heart Sutra. Okay. Homage to the perfection of wisdom of the Blessed Mother. Thus I've heard. At one time, the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajgir, or in Mass Vulture's Mountain, appeared a simple monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. In that time, the Blessed One was absorbed in the concentration of countless aspects of phenomena called profound illumination. That time also, the superior Balakshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, was looking perfectly at the practice of profound perfection of wisdom, looking perfectly also at the five aggregates being empty of inherent existence. Then to the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to Superior Balakshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, how should a son in lineage train who wishes to engage with the practice of profound perfection of wisdom? Thus he spoke, and Superior Balakshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, replied to Venerable Shariputra as follows. Shariputra, whatever son or daughter lineage wishes to engage the practice of profound perfection of wisdom should look perfectly like this. Subsequently, looking perfectly and correctly also at the five aggregates being empty of inherent existence. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is none other than form, and form is none other than emptiness. Likewise, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, like this, all phenomena of emptiness having no characteristics, do not produce and do not cease. They have no defilement, no separation from defilement. They have no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there's no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, and no consciousness. There's no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mentality, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no tactile object, no phenomenon. There's no I element, and so forth, up to no mentality element, also up to no element of mental consciousness. There's no ignorance and no exhaustion of ignorance, and so forth, up to no aging and death, no exhaustion of aging and death. Likewise, there's no suffering, origin, cessation, or path, no exalted awareness, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, because there's no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and abide in the perfection of wisdom. Their minds have no obstructions and no fear. Passing but utterly beyond perversity, they attain the final nirvana. Also, all Buddhas reside perfectly in the three times, having relied upon the perfection of wisdom, became manifest complete Buddhas in state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the equal to the unequal mantra, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, since it's not false, should be known as the truth. The mantra of perfection of wisdom is proclaimed, Tayata Gada Paragata Samgati Bodhisoha. Shariputra Bodhisattva, great being, should train the profound perfection of wisdom like this. Then the Blessed One arose from that concentration and said to Spirit Balakshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, that he'd spoken well. Good son, just like that. Since it's like that, just as you have revealed, in that way the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced, and the Tathagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, the Venerable Shariputra, Spirit Balakshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, and the entire circle of disciples, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, demigods, and spirits, were delighted and highly praised what had been spoken by the Blessed One. Okay, so just taking a moment now, we'll just do a few prayers to start here. That we're visualize yourself in a wide open space. Again, ourselves surrounded by all sentient beings. Grounds like lapis, the people closest to us are here, and then we sort of fan out to all the beings that we don't know, but nevertheless are karmically connected to. So our mom on our left, father on our right, people we love the most behind us to support, and people we like the least or have karmic debts with, whatever, in front of us as objects of compassion. Moving out from there, people from all over the world without exception, all animals, sort of natural beings here, different ecosystems. The whole spirit world is here. We can think of all the different dimensions of that, different planes like elemental planes, astral, ethereal, and so forth. All the celestial beings, gods and demigods, different kinds of gods, so forth. And then countless beings in lower states of rebirth, beings that are just in states of sort of great suffering and long periods of suffering. So hell beings and hungry ghost beings. So it's surrounded by all these beings. We're all together as a family. We're all going for refuge here. Keeping it simple just for our ethics classes here, we're just going to visualize Buddha Shakyamuni like a big sun in the sky. So sort of a dome of a blue sky above us, like a summer day, no clouds, and midday sun. And that is Buddha Shakyamuni. He's wearing 3 robes of a monk, golden energy body, medicinal bowl, like a begging bowl with medicinal nectar in it in his left hand at his lap, and his right hand's touching the earth in the subduing neutral. We can visualize to unify Sutra and Tantra, which is what we do in the Gelugpa tradition. We're going to visualize his higher Sambhogakaya form at his heart. So Buddha's sort of higher angelic form, Conqueror Vajradhara and Vajradhatu Ishvara, yin and yang. And they're together in sexual embrace, beautiful sapphire blue bodies, same crowns and so forth. And he has a dorje and bell, and she has a skull cup and curved knife. So taking refuge from our heart and generating bodhicitta, and all sentient beings until we achieve enlightenment, go for refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Through the virtues we collect by giving another perfections, may we become a Buddha for the benefit of all. And all sentient beings to achieve enlightenment, go for refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Through the virtues we collect by giving another perfections, may we become a Buddha for the benefit of all. And all sentient beings until we achieve enlightenment, go for refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And through the virtues we collect by giving other perfections, may we become a Buddha for the benefit of all. Do a quick blessing here. Just visualize white lights and nectars coming down from Vajradhara and Vajradhatu Ishvara's heart, and purifying us and all sentient beings, sort of for proper refuge. So it's like tuning, in the old days, tuning a radio, or I guess sort of logging on to your computer, going to the right website to download. We're getting all this wonderful energy, clearing our mind of worldly refuge and getting us some true refuge. So rather than ignorance, grasping at inherent existence, thinking things are really real, we're focusing on emptiness here. Giving us spiritual power, powering up, like in a video game here. Please grant us your blessings. So at this point, we've sort of been purified by the white light, and that turns into golden light from Buddha's heart here, like sunlight or sunbeams coming down. And just like a download, you're downloading PDFs or some new actually probably new operating systems, like your phone's updating when you go to bed there, and you turn on in the morning, it's like, oh, got a whole new phone, same thing, we're updating here. Just feel that all the teachings of LamRim, Tantra going into us, all the sort of virtues of wisdom, power, and compassion are going into us. We're all sort of us and all sentient beings are glowing gold, light. Four immeasurables here of love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. May everyone be happy. May everyone be free from misery. May no one ever be separated from their happiness. And may everyone have equanimity, free from hatred and attachment. Practicing the 7 limbs here, making our path Buddhist here. So for prostration, showing love and respect and devotion here from our hearts to Buddha Shakyamuni and all holy beings. Offerings, so opening our heart in generosity, giving to receive all the teachings here. Confession, declaration, rejoicing. And again, just stepping up and owning all your bad qualities and character faults. To Buddha and to all sentient beings, saying you're going to outgrow them, purify them, let them go. And at the same time, rejoicing in our own virtues we create and have in our character, as well as all the goodness of everyone around us. So we can hold at our hands here. Just well, two things. We've got lion throne here and a Dharma chakra. So we're just sending up that lion throne here. Please, Buddha Shakyamuni, and all the teachers you appear as in my life, all my gurus and teachers always stay with us. And stay with me lifetime after lifetime. Please keep guiding me, giving me personal advice. Always stay with me. And I'm sending up the Dharma chakra here. And we say, please continue to teach us Dharma, in particular, just the whole Buddhist path of the four Arya truths and the Eightfold Path. True sufferings, true origins, true cessations, and true paths. Most of all, please teach us emptiness. Emptiness, that we be liberated from samsara. And dedicate everything that we do right now, this morning, and just throughout our lives, may always be put towards the bigger final goal, the bigger purpose of sort of divine plan of helping all sentient beings be released from samsara. Final offering here. We handle that offering in our hearts, holding a sort of purified universe at our heart. And say the ground sprinkled with perfume and spread with flowers, the four land, sun, and moon. Great month, four land, sun, and moon, seen as a Buddha land and offer thus. All beings enjoy such pure lights. So we can just be holding in our heart just all beautiful things, offering up all this beauty to Buddha Shakyamuni. And me to say, please teach us and grant us your blessings and inspiration, Buddha, to be like you. Om Idam Guru Radha Mandala Kamirti. We send forth this jeweled mandala, precious teacher, Shakyamuni. Having made that offering, again, golden lights and nectars coming down like sunlight. All of us are sort of vibrating and resonating with this energy. And we say, please grant us your blessings of body, speech, and mind. Buddha Shakyamuni, please continue to bless us and guide us. Grant us your blessing now. So Buddha Shakyamuni starts to get really small, turning from a big sun just kind of like into a little star, dissolving into the divine couple at his heart. And you're like a little blue diamond or a piece of lapis in the sky, like a little shooting star. Sort of come down to the crown of our head. You're about a foot above us, turn around to the same position we're in. It's the same direction, very slowly, made out of energy or light, little blue light come down the crown of our head, enter our crown chakra, and slowly descend to our heart. It's like just throwing like a little leaf floating down to the earth, same thing, very slow and soft. And when they enter our heart, just feel that they dissolve right into our heart chakra, into our root mind. It's like their mind, their heart, their soul, our soul, all of us becomes one. All of their energy and virtues become sort of directly injected into us. And you can just feel just great sense of spaciousness here. Luminosity or a sort of wakefulness. And great bliss and joy. So bliss, feeling great sense of totality, unity with everything, and wonderful rest and peace. And joy here being sort of a creative power at the same time. So just coming out short meditation there, starting to sink in. Great here. Okay, great. So thanks for coming. And again, I'll just sort of complete the introduction on vows and commitments here. So I think last time I actually probably should have looked at the video, but I'm just going by memory here. I think it was I just started talking about the pratimoksha or freedom vows, or sort of the vows of individual freedom. So the sort of spirit, and I mean, if I'm repeating myself, it's good to know anyway, but sort of the idea of taking these sort of lifetime lay vows as a Buddhist, even if you're not ordained. Of course, if you're ordained, these are part of the foundational commitments that you take. But if we don't want to be a monk or a nun, we just want to be a regular person, Dharma person, this is sort of our entrance into Buddhist ethics here. So these, it's the idea of refraining from hurting others, and from the sort of creating the basis for hurting others, and doing the big things, entering into the pratimoksha vows or getting this for morality. This is the first step that you make in a real concrete move towards renunciation. So when we, like you're studying LamRim, you're doing this or that, and you're studying Buddhism and studying true sufferings, there's a certain point where it's like, okay, I'm studying true sufferings and true origins. I know where these sufferings are coming from, from my ego, self-cherishing mind, self-grasping mind. Okay, it's the classic thing you get, sometimes you hear this if you go, different, whatever, reading different philosophies or politics or whatever, there's always a thing, well, what do I do? What do I do? And then what's funny is like sometimes certain views or religions, right, they don't tell you what to do. They're just like, well, this is the way it is. It's just like, okay, well, okay, what now? Like, oh, thanks very much. Like, this is really bad or what, but it's like, what can I do? What can I do to help? How can I help myself? So technically the good thing about Dharma, of course, is that those bases are covered. And with this, like once you start learning about renunciation, like in true sufferings and stuff, and I'm creating general renunciation, what do I do? Well, there is the whole program here. So when we're looking at true cessations or true paths, like true cessation is a way of turning off suffering. True paths, the big thing there, the Eightfold Path, is the whole set of techniques, arts, resources, and tools for turning off suffering. So, of course, a big part of that is your Buddhist ethics, and opening the door to that, walking through, is your pratimoksha vows. In particular, those are connected to the 10 non-virtues, which we'll talk about as well. And I might have mentioned Dharmabhadra, this sort of great Galupa Buddhist Lama and saint. He said that, the 10 non-virtues, sort of three mental, sort of non-virtues or mental vices, mental actions associated with the three poisons of ignorance, anger, and attachment. So these are the three negative actions we do in our mind, where we have ignorance, or wrong views, and malice, or having a spiteful, angry, very reactive mind. It's more than anger, because you can be angry when you're being malicious or spiteful. You're wanting people to suffer. You're wanting to hurt people. You're in a bad mood and you want people to suffer around you. It's just like bad mood. It's like, oh, that guy's happy. Man, I wish, I hope he falls off his bike. It's just like that kind of thing, like spiteful mind. And then, of course, covetousness is when you have that really strong grasping mind, where you're jealous and envious and wanting things that you don't have, particularly wanting things other people have that you don't, right? So what Dharmabhadra said is that what we're doing when we're getting into pratimoksha vows is we're attacking these three thought processes, that these three things, anger, attachment, and ignorance, sort of manifesting into wrong view, particularly wrong view that denies karma and emptiness, and malice and covetousness. This these form the basis of doing all the other negative actions, actions like killing and stealing, sexual misconduct, hurtful speech, gossip, these things. These three sort of poisons in your mind end up creating the mood or the background of negativity from which all these other kinds of negative actions start to emerge or be made manifest. So he says, like, this is why in a lot of ways, with taking ethics and stuff, that's the target this is the idea of really training our mind and making our mind positive. So he was saying, like, the proper motivation for taking pratimoksha vows then is totally being fed up with samsara, the suffering that's like really understanding where your suffering's coming from. And it's coming from these 3 root delusions or negative energies or negative moods, so to speak, in your mind. That's the target. Taking your vows and commitments, it's precisely the medicine for that. Okay, okay, still have a bit of time here. Let me just take a peek. I just want to make sure that time-wise, yeah, 8:30, great. So there's a couple different Buddhist schools, and this is sort of a longer discussion I'll leave for later, but the different schools on emptiness, like the different Buddhist schools, like the Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Yogacara, and middle Madhyamika, in particular Madhyamika, Prasangika, they all have different views on how the vows work. And this is actually really interesting. We don't have time to go into it, but I thought I'd share a little bit because I think it is kind of neat. The one thing you get, and again, it would be if you go into a lot of the Theravada traditions readings, you could probably find all this. So if you go to, I have a copy in the closet here, but if you, let's say, the Visuddhimagga, and go into the really good Theravada system on ethics, they'll give you a bit of a background on this. So I'm giving an extremely superficial and probably not very supported or detailed discussion of this, so I just point everyone's into that direction. But by Vaibhashika system, if you see basically that reality is nothing but changing phenomena, that everything's changing. They even talk about sort of like particles, like just sort of dharmas. Everything's just being put together by different factors and then coming apart, almost like different atoms or particles come together, create things, like they're impermanent, they're changing, they fall apart, this and that. And so they say that technically vows work on that basis, that they're, we're putting things together here. They're impermanent things that we're putting together in terms of our behavior. And one thing that they said, which is interesting, is that when it's kind of like you're creating yourself almost out of dharmas as an ethical person, it's almost like you're creating a positive energy in your body and mind, in the Vaibhashika system. So they said that it's like vows, when you're in morality, like you're in Buddhist morality, it's kind of like an invisible kind of energy or stuff, or almost like an aura that you create. They call it non-communicating physical vows or non-communicative physical reality. I mean, whatever, you can look at it. So they have an idea that basically you could say that the vows, keeping them, creating them, creates a certain aura or vibration. So the higher schools kind of look down on that, because for them, it's almost like you're creating out of energy, like a positive field or something like that. And so that doesn't withstand a lot of our logical argument from the higher schools. But on an intuitive level, we know that that's true. And what's interesting is that, you might look at it and go, yeah, it's really sort of hippie, like what, positive vibrations or energy. But actually, when we get to Tantra, that's exactly how we see the vows. That's the funny thing, is that when we talk about, in particular, Tantric Samaya to your teacher and to your deity, and working on that level, it's all about energy, good energy or bad energy. Anyway, no, it's a little superficial. That's another talk for another time. But I'm just pointing this out, that you'll see, not just in our tradition, Buddhist tradition, but in other religious traditions, they talk about this. If you're an ethical person, you've got a very good vibration, very good energy that's healing to everyone around you and helps people just by you keeping your vows. So this is like in Theravada, is what I always like, is when they do, like in Thailand or Burma, these places, or Myanmar should call it, monks will do healings or even exorcisms, and they'll do it just by their own energy of reciting sutras or meditating. It's almost like their ethical energy or spiritual power itself can dispel bad energy, evil spirits or whatever, or negative energy, or just them coming and chanting sutras can clean up a space. Right? So we know this with Tantra, but what I'm saying is that the Vaibhashika school, they say that this even works on a sutric level, on just very basic level of Buddhism. Once you take your vows, you're creating all sorts of good energy for yourself and other people. And conversely, if you're a bad person and breaking your vows are very unethical, you have a very low vibration or a bad aura, right? So I think that, I mean, we can look at our experience and see that this is the case. I find I know how I feel when I'm being good and when I'm being bad. Like there's actually an energetic feel. You can know when you're breaking your vows, when you're kind of blowing it as a Buddhist. It feels different than when you're being a good Buddhist, right? It feels when you're around very pure people, there's a very positive energy. Like when you're at a temple with ordained people or people really trying hard to be good Dharma people and you're doing practice or meditating together, it's like the vibration energy is very, very pure. And then you can go to places where the energy, of course, is really bad. I mean, this is, we can go on and on about this. Like I've been over in my life to different quote unquote famous haunted houses and stuff like that, where it's like the energy is like completely evil. And it actually is a physical energy that you feel, like your body temperature drops and everything. It's just like a real dark energy. So I actually would argue that on one level, at least figuratively, that Vaibhashika idea of sort of creating an aura and your vows being a non-communicating physical energy or whatever, I think is sort of correct on one level. And you can see one last thing, that if you have perfect Buddhist ethics, and you see with these high lamas or yogis or yoginis when they die, all sorts of magical things happen, and they leave relics and stuff. But they always say that after the person's passed into clear light, they're in tukdam or meditating when they die. There's always a smell either of roses or sandalwood. And they say this is the same with famous Catholic saints or Hindu sadhus or famous, Sufi saints, men and women that are really good Muslims when they die. When you go see the body or you go to the hospital, not only is there really radiant pure energy, but it smells amazing. There's some kind of floral essence or even sandalwood. And what they always say is that person died with pure morality, which is interesting, right? So that's, anyway, so I think that there's some truth to that. The Prasangika or middle way consequential school, they say when you keep your vows, technically, if everything's just a label and a base, that if I'm creating objects through the way I think and talk about them, technically vows are the same thing. When you're taking your vows, you're labeling yourself a certain way, so you're creating yourself a certain way, right? It's the conceptualization of seeing yourself, not seeing and not doing anything bad. So I really want you to think about that in a very profound way, that when you're taking your vows and trying to live in Buddhist morality, you're creating the perception of yourself as being a pure person, which ends up becoming true, right? Isn't that kind of cool? So in a lot of ways, and energetically, if there's a mind, and of course with mind goes prana, right? The Vaibhashika thing is true as well. Not only are you seeing or creating the experience of yourself being a pure person, but energetically there's that content there as well. This is what we'll get into Tantra on why deity yoga works. I'll just sort of put this out there, even though Tantra is secret, just to sort of this sort of conceptual idea is, if you're always seeing yourself as a deity, you will always keep your vows. Why? Because the deity is pure and perfect. So ironically, keeping your vows, like you'll be able to keep your vows while you practice Tantra. Like that's the idea of having pure view, is if you have pure view, you don't have the contaminated negative energy that starts generating vices, right? So if you're Green Tara, it's easier to be a better person because Green Tara is an amazing, better person, right? Better than you. Whereas if you see yourself as a normal person, just looking at myself, Matthew, with all my failings and flaws and whatever, it's an easier, like just this energetic mass here, the way I label myself, the way I see myself, it's more, I've associated this with my ego. There's a certain story here it's way easier to be negative, right? And to break your vows. The Yogacara school, of course, vows are mental seeds, just always planting seeds that create minds in their objects. So it's the same thing. Your vows or breaking your vows are just about planting either good or bad seeds. The Sautrantika school and some of the lower Sutric schools always say that what vows are really is basically at each point, it's more the Theravada idea that it's about intention. It's your constant mindful intention to be good and not be bad. So I just flew to Bangkok the other day, and I had a monk, a Thai monk, in Theravada tradition, who actually runs a temple in Toronto, which is very sweet. So we were flying out of Vancouver, and he was getting off the plane, and like when I see it, he's like, and I said, it's great, and I said, actually, I'm in there. Oh my God, you're done. That's great. And we start talking, and he's like, and as he was, I said, have a wonderful time. He was going to do retreat in the jungle. I was like, oh, that's so wonderful. Have a wonderful retreat. And he's like, I got some advice to you. And I'm like, okay, please tell me the advice. But he's like, always be mindful, because if you're mindful, you'll be good. And if you're not mindful, you'll be bad. I'm like, yes, sir, very, very good. And then he left the plane. But that's the Theravada approach. And it's wonderful. And that's great. If you're mindful, then you have an intention. And when you're mindful, you can actually feel yourself starting to be bad, right? Or feel yourself starting to be good. You can actually catch that energy when you're mindful and someone's, says something bad to you at Starbucks. You can feel that hurt, and then the bad mood, and then something's coming up, where you want to say something. So at that point, your mindfulness is like, oh, put the brakes on, like stop that train from leaving the station, right? And then you can apply that antidote, right? So in the Satrantika point of view, they talk about that, which is good. Okay, so it's more of like a physical restraining of your body and mind. Okay, the other thing I wanted to say, which is a thing that we always say, I always remember my dear friend and teacher, David Gonzalez, always said that, is he said, the energy of taking a vow to avoid a certain behavior and then deliberately avoiding it is much more powerful than simply not doing it, because it's your natural inclination at the moment. So of course, taking vows and keeping them. I remember Gary Schneider, that famous beat poet who's so wonderful. He's a Zen student his whole life, right? He said that there is like an incredible, infinite amount of power. He's being poetic here, but like an incredible amount of power in deliberately taking a vow not to kill something. That in the world where everything's killing, right? All the wars and corruption, everything blowing up and killing, and everyone being horrible to each other and killing animals and eating them, and animals are killing each other. Everything's killing. It's all like as Hegel would call, the slaughterhouse of history. That when you're the person that stands up and says, I am not going to kill something, and then you don't kill anything, you don't kill bugs, you don't kill whatever, there's so much incredible, almost like divine power in doing that, right? So making a vow and keeping it really, really sets a boundary, but it also creates an enormous amount of positive energy behind it. So that's why, like when you read vows, it says don't kill. Well, I don't kill anything anyway. If you just say, well, I don't run around killing people when I'm mad at them, right? I don't stab them, like whatever, because they bought the last thing at Costco, whatever. I don't do that. So, hey, I'm not killing. Well, just not doing something, you might do it in the future. Like there isn't a whole lot of power in that. Actually putting yourself out there, labeling it, saying, I do not kill. It's a vow that I take. It's like not drinking or taking drugs just because you don't feel like it. That isn't the same thing as taking a vow not to doing it and standing by it. So I'm just saying energetically, there's a different karma behind that. That seems very, very straightforward to everybody, I'm sure. So that's why we take all the karmas. And you'll see when you take your vows, I always say like 80% of them are easy to keep. You don't even notice you're keeping them. So some people would say, well, why bother even taking it as a vow then? I don't have that problem. But again, it's cultivating that kind of merit positive energy where you say, I'm not going to do X, Y, and Z. I never do X, Y, and Z anyway. It's like saying, I promise never to hang glide. It's like I never go hang gliding anyway, so who cares? It's like, but let's say there's some ethical prerogative in saying that, but saying that and keeping that creates a whole container and a whole energy around it, right? Then Geshe Michael said something funny. I wrote this one little note. He said that your current natural goodness comes from your past ethical living. It's easy to lose this goodness as you get older and the karma runs out. Karma runs out. So a lot of your good virtues coming into this life from past lives, your merit gets sort of chewed up or sort of used, whatever, you're maxing out your credit card. It's important this is why you take vows and commitments and keep filling up the gas tank. If you've been a good person, but don't really try being a good person, that can sort of start to burn out at a certain point. Like, in other words, self-overcoming is a full-time job 24/7. You always have to keep at this your whole life, keep filling up this energy merit of morality. You can't just sort of, yeah, I was a monk for 5 years in Thailand, my early 20s, good enough. Like that kind of set the bar, I'm okay now. You have to keep at it all the time. And I have a great quote, which Voltaire always said, is he said, what is mistaken as virtue in old people is just oftentimes just exhaustion. Right. So he's being very cynical here. But in other words, when you're old, like, oh, Matthew, like he's amazing. He's so quiet. He doesn't drink. He just sits there like this all the time. I want to be a saint like him. It's like, I'm just tired. Like, I don't like, like I'm just exhausted, right? So it's like, so Voltaire was like sort of making a joke, like, just don't make that mistake. Like, you got to keep at it, right? You got to, at each moment, just like keep practicing your ethics as a thing that you do. Okay, so going into quickly before we end here, the Bodhisattva Vows. So there's a book containing the Bodhisattva Vows. It's called the Sutra of the Essence of Space. It's actually, we get the Bodhisattva Vows in one big clump, but it looks like they're spread out in a bunch of different sutras that Buddha taught in different texts. So what happened is over the years, people have been kind enough to compile them in one space in one book. So anyway, the 13 root downfalls, 13 of them are in the Sutra of the Essence of Space. There's one vow in the Sutra of Skillful Means. The Bodhisattva Levels by Sangha contains 4 vows. That's in a commentary. Shanti David, Compendium of Advice, his other famous book, the one probably no one reads compared to Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life, has 18 vows. And Chandra Goman, the other great Buddhist scholar and saint there, has the 42nd secondary vows in a book he wrote called The 20 Verses on Vows. Right. So as you know, oftentimes Buddha just taught for his audience, and he didn't, he would just, the stuff would be sort of spread out of a whole bunch of different things. So we kind of have to put it all together. Okay, so those are the Bodhisattva vows. So what are the thing here? The benefits of vows, things that the benefits of the Bodhisattva vows in particular. One thing is the idea that the vows end up being taken from someone else. And what this means is that being a bodhisattva and having these vows and really sort of taking it a step further from your pratimoksha vows, if you're sort of, and of course you'll put yourself out there as a superhero, like I'm like Superman or Batman being the great bodhisattva, but nevertheless you're trying to be a good Buddhist and live your life that way, you set a certain example that you have to end up living by. If you have integrity and you don't want to be a hypocrite, right? You have to live up to other people's scrutiny and expectations of being a Buddhist, in particular being a Mahayana Buddhist. And I get this, like I've been at work for 30 years, kind of like the whatever, I don't run around telling everybody I'm Buddhist, but everybody kind of knows. But the good thing is that I've set myself up where I have to be good at work, because everyone's like, wow, you're like super in a bad mood today, Mr. Buddhist. Like people get really kind of mean, but it's true, right? So it's like everyone's like kind of holding me, because like, oh, Matthew's like the kind of nice, kind of flaky, kind of hippie Buddhist guy. He's kind of setting the example. So it's like he has to be mindful. And I've had friends over the years call me on stuff where it's like someone comes at the end, it's just like, can I have a coffee? No, we're landing, go away. And I'm like, man, I thought you're supposed to be compassionate. Like that guy's got a long trip and you should have made him a coffee. And I'm like, okay, thanks for helping me keep my vows. And I have to brew the coffee for the guy, right? So ironically, your bodhisattva vows become a public thing where everyone wants you to get enlightened, wants you to be a good Buddhist. So in a lot of ways, they're helping you. They're kind of like helping you watch or keep your vows, which is a good thing. Having pure motivation with your vows, that the only reason, in a lot of ways, as a bodhisattva or wannabe bodhisattva, you're taking your vows here is that you're having the intention, of course, to escape samsara and help all beings escape it in the same way, to be a Buddha for the benefit of all beings. So if we should always have this intention all the time with our vows, and this is what allows us to keep, in other words, we have the final goal in mind. We have sort of the reason, the primal intention why we're doing this. So one of Christina's teachers in Toronto, Venerable Sonam Rinpoche, very amazing sort of enlightened being Lama in the Nyingma center there in the junction in Rinpoche, he would always say, went to a number of his talks, and it's very sweet. He always said, work on generating bodhicitta. If you really generate bodhicitta, you'll keep your other vows. So in other words, if I'm really making my bodhicitta at each moment my main focus and my main intention, it's easier to keep my commitments, right? Because compassion is something I'm really sitting in and dwelling. So I'm really having this loving, compassionate attitude. So it's hard to be bad when you're in that space, right? And then the other two is that all your vows are always fixable or renewable, right? You can sort of purify them and retake them. And if you're always mindful, you won't break them in the first place, of course, which I mentioned before. Okay, just to finish here, yeah, I have here, which is the importance of the reason to keep your vows when you're keeping your pratimoksha and bodhisattva vows. So in other words, benefit, again, these are just reasons to keep your vows here, is how you, to see them as being something super important and super relevant to your life as not just a spiritual person, but as a Buddhist. So why we should keep our vows, one sort of motivation for keeping them is we're respecting the speech or the teachings of Buddha. We have to see that these are given to you personally as your personal work in this life to do. And they're sort of given, you can sort of see it almost as a personal gift from the Buddha himself, from all the Buddhas to you. This is your work. You always talk about in therapy, this is your work. Healing yourself, getting over your childhood trauma. This is your work. No one else can do it. It's the same thing here with your vows. No one else can keep your vows for you. All right. Like in psychoanalysis, they call it the big other, like some external agency that'll do it for me. There is no big other when it comes to Buddhist ethics. It's just you and your good habits or bad habits, nothing else. To have three intentions. Number one, we intend to keep the vows because we intend to reach Buddhahood, and we intend to help all other beings. So in a lot of ways, that's having the intention, the bodhicitta intention. We're keeping vows because we're trying to get enlightened. We're trying to benefit all sentient beings. The vows allow us to do that. Number four, you respect them as the highest thing. They are the door and key to the Pure Lands. So what we would mean by that is, of course, just the highest view of the vows. If karma is what's creating reality, karma is your perception, karma is how you think and talk about things, karma is how you perceive things, karma is how things appear to you, karma is the world you live in the self that you create, everything is create. If vows are good habits or good causes or good karma, that's the highest tantric practice you can do, is keeping your vows. Your vows are creating reality itself. They're changing reality itself. They're taking you from a contaminated suffering state to a pure blissful state. So keeping your vows on that basis is the most important thing that you can do. So I respect that. So it's not, some kind of Buddhists have this, maybe they used to call it kind of what they called beat Zen, this idea that everything's empty, so vows don't matter, right? Like, whatever, I can do whatever I want. Everything's one, so, good thing, good and bad, how do you judge, this kind of thing. We all know nowadays that that's sort of, needless to say, a wrong view of Buddhist ethics. So quite the opposite. We're seeing that the little things all do matter, that all the things I do matter at each moment, because at each moment I'm creating reality. At each moment, I'm sort of projecting out purity or wanting to. So it's the highest things that I can do. All the attention details, which is why Guru Padmasambhava, Guru Rinpoche, a great teacher, said, my view is high as the sky. In other words, emptiness. My attention to karma is as fine as flour. So all the little things that I do at each moment, all of them matter, right? So anyway, just wanted to say that. Yeah, I've talked about that before. Okay, so just a couple. I've mentioned some of this stuff before, like just what instigates breaking your vows. So of course, again, disrespecting them, having klesha attacks, not knowing what your vows are, being careless and distracted, the three poisons and so forth. But also two other things, just to conclude here, is that whatever you're doing, we talked about this in our courses on karma, Amidharma Kosha, and diamond cutter, certain objects have more power spiritually than others. So doing karma towards them creates a bigger result. So if you're keeping your vows with, with pure motivations and towards powerful objects, like making offerings, doing things according to the 3 jewels, always relying on their help, doing your morality in terms as doing it for the benefit of all sentient beings, you get bigger energy being created for that. In conversely, breaking your vows towards more pure, bigger objects has a bigger negative karma effect too, right? So if I quit being a Buddhist, let's say I've had it, can't take it anymore, but I decide to do it in the most dramatic way possible, which is in the middle of retreat with my Lama standing up, I quit, and I grab my Tara statue and I smash it on the ground. I go to the altar and I throw it over and I'm like, I hate this, I quit. That's way worse than just one night on a Tuesday going, okay, I'm done with Buddhism. Right? So you can see that the negative energy you created in situation number 1 is way more powerful and more negative than situation number 2, even though it's the same kind of, action that you're doing. Let's say Buddhism. So this is going to be keeping your, always have this in mind too, with what you're dealing with your karma and with your vows. And then accumulating things, just like you can set good intentions going and it creates a lot of good energy and it keeps it rolling, vice versa with bad things, because one of the big things with karma, as we know, is that the seeds grow over time, right? That from little seeds can become big events, from like little seeds or nuts come big trees. If you break your vows and don't repair them, the worse it gets. Not only does that karma fester, but oftentimes it grows or it starts to snowball and you add to it. So from little vows being broken, it starts to get bigger and create. So it's just like they say, like let's say in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, like don't even a little sip of alcohol, or just like smoking, because I used to smoking socially, right? You've quit for years and then someone's at a party, you want to drag, yeah. Then, the day later you go in the store buying a pack, right? Like, it's washing your vows on that level, seeing how, like when you're breaking them, purify them right away. Don't look for exceptions and trying to get like this and that, because it can snowball and become something really, really a lot bigger and a lot more terrible. There was a movie, it was at the Vancouver Film Festival. I didn't see it. It was a Chinese movie. And it sounded really good, but it was this Buddhist community in the country somewhere, and they have to, I don't know the details. I just read the film review. I didn't see it, but they have to fix their temple. I think maybe they have to fix their Buddhist statue. So they don't have any money. So it's like, how do we raise the money for, we don't hit like this, and the villagers, everyone's poor, like it's going to take us a long time. So the monks are trying to figure out ways. So they start doing fundraising, and then they start, and again, the ends justify the means. They start like making all sorts of bad ethical choices to get the money for the Buddha statue, and slowly breaking their vows, where it's just like, do we accept money from the drug dealing gang here? Well, come on, why we're making the Buddha statue, why not? And then at the end, I can't remember if they start doing gambling to raise the money. So at the very end, all the monks are breaking all their vows and becoming like a gang in order to make the Buddha statue, to put get the gold leaf on it all the time. So it's like a morality play of like, really, really be careful with this stuff, because before you know it, you're sliding down the hill. In other words, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Right? That's the always counterweight. Like in Buddhism, we're always saying about ethics and intentions, everything. But I always say the old English expression, the road to hell is paved with good intention. In other words, you have to be very, very careful and really mindful with your intentions. Everyone says that. You even talk to great dictators and serial killers, and they always think they're a nice person. Well, I had a good dog and I was always nice to my mom, and everyone thinks they're a nice person. Everyone always thinks they have good intentions, even when they're being a jerk. So more mindfulness allows us to have better intentions, and then it's a little bit easier with our vows, make them more pure. Okay, so there we go. I'll just sort of conclude on that. And like I say, next class I'll get into the refuge commitments. So benefits of taking refuge and refuge commitments when we take refuge as a Buddhist. What are we sort of vowing to do as a Buddhist? How are we vowing to act in a Buddhist way? Okay, so any quick question or for everybody good? Okay, great. Let me just press stop here, and let me do a dedication here. The most important thing, by the blessings of all holy beings, the truth of karma, forever pure spirit intention, may all of our dharma wishes be fulfilled and all sentient beings reach enlightenment. In particular, like all of our good karma here, studying our vows, may this allow us to have perfect Buddhist ethics in our daily lives. Okay, so thank you and see you next time.